All right, welcome to The Explainer. Today we're going to dive into the story of a car that was an absolute beast on the racetrack, a car that completely revolutionized automotive design, and then just vanished, only to be reborn decades later as a Hollywood legend. This is the incredible story of the fabulous Hudson Hornet.
So chances are you've seen the movie Cars, right? And you probably remember the wise, retired champion Doc Hudson. It's easy to wonder, was he just a cool character somebody made up, or was there a real, fabulous Hudson Hornet that inspired him?
Well, the answer is a huge, emphatic yes. Doc Hudson was absolutely based on one of the most dominant and truly innovative cars in the history of American racing. So let's meet the real deal.
Okay, so to really get why this car was such a big deal, we've got to start with the engineering that made it all possible. And I mean, this was a design so radical, it really did change the game.
All right, so this right here, this is the secret sauce. Back in 1948, Hudson came out with what they called the step-down design. Now see, everyone else was building the car body on top of a big, heavy frame. Hudson, they merged them. They dropped the floor pan down inside the frame. It's not just a clever name, you literally had to step down to get into the car.
So you might be thinking, okay, so what? Well, it all comes down to physics. By dropping the floor, you create this incredibly low center of gravity. And what that means is the car just had this unbelievable handling and stability. The heavy frame also kind of wrapped around the passengers, which made it a whole lot safer. But on the track, this design let the Hornet dive into corners way faster and smoother than its competitors. It was like it was locked onto a rail.
Okay, so you've got this brilliant piece of engineering. Now let's talk about how that translated to absolute dominance on the racetrack. Because on the rough, tough dirt tracks of early NASCAR, that handling advantage, it became their absolute secret weapon.
And wow, what a weapon it was. See, Hudson didn't just win, they reigned. From 1952 all the way to 1954, the Hudson Hornet won 3 straight NASCAR Manufacturers Championships. In fact, think about this, it won the very first 3 in the history of the sport.
I mean, the scale of this dominance, it's just hard to wrap your head around. In the 1952 season alone, Hudson Hornets won 27 out of 34 races. That is nearly an 80% win rate for an entire season. They weren't just beating the competition, they were flat out embarrassing them.
It was really this perfect storm of engineering. You had the step-down chassis that let it fly through corners. You had its huge 308 cubic inch straight-six engine, which delivered just massive amounts of torque to blast out of those corners. And then, if you wanted it, you could get the optional twin-H power setup with 2 carburetors for an extra kick of horsepower. It was the whole package.
And all of this, it built a legend. The name Fabulous Hudson Hornet, that wasn't cooked up in some marketing meeting. That was a nickname that came straight from the drivers and the fans who watched this thing on the track and realized it was just genuinely unbeatable.
But this is where the story takes a really tragic, ironic turn. You know the old saying, win on Sunday, sell on Monday? Well, while the Hornet was winning everything on Sunday, it was just collecting dust in the showrooms on Monday. And that's the big question here, isn't it? How on earth could the undisputed king of the racetrack be losing the sales race so badly? Well, the answer is this perfect storm of style, marketing, and brutal economics. And these numbers, wow, they really tell the story. Just look at this. As the Hornet's racing legend was being built, its sales were going into a total freefall. In 1953, its biggest championship year, sales had already dropped by almost 40% from just 2 years earlier. They were winning trophies, sure, but the company was bleeding cash. So what went wrong? Well, it was a few things all at once. First, that amazing chassis that made it a winner, it was also super expensive to restyle. So while other brands were rolling out flashy new designs with tail fins and chrome every single year, the Hornet looked pretty much the same from 1948 to 54. Then, you had competitors screaming about their new Rocket V8s, and Hudson's amazing straight-six just sounded, well, old-fashioned to buyers. And finally, Ford and GM got into this brutal price war that a smaller, independent company like Hudson just couldn't survive.
And from there, the end came shockingly fast. In 1954, a desperate Hudson merged with another company, Nash, to form AMC. The legendary Detroit factory was shut down. By 1955, the cars being sold as Hudsons were really just Nash cars with a different grille. People started calling them hashes, kind of making fun of the mashup. And just 2 years later, in 1957, the Hudson brand was gone, forever.
I mean, this comparison just says everything, doesn't it? On one side, you have the 1954 Hornet, a true champion, a masterpiece of engineering born in Detroit. And on the other, the 55, a rebadged Nash body, totally uninspired, and a total sales disaster. It was the death of a legend.
So, for decades, the story of the fabulous Hudson Hornet just faded away. It became a footnote in the history books, until a brand new generation discovered its story in the most unlikely place you could imagine.
Yeah, after 1957, the Hornet was basically a ghost. Unless you are a hardcore racing historian or a classic car collector, the name Hudson Hornet probably meant nothing to you. It was a piece of history, cherished by a few, but pretty much forgotten by the rest of the world.
And then, 2006 happened. Pixar's movie Cars came out, and it introduced a whole new generation to Doc Hudson, a character whose entire backstory was the real-life story of the Hornet's rise and fall. Voiced by Paul Newman, an actor who was also a real-life race car driver, Doc single-handedly rescued the Hornet from obscurity and cemented its story in pop culture for millions of new fans.
And that right there brings us completely full circle. You know that famous line from the movie, "I'm a precision instrument of speed and aerodynamics"? That's not just some clever line written for a kid's film. It's a direct callback to the revolutionary step-down engineering that gave the real car its incredibly low center of gravity and that unbeatable handling, the very thing that made it so fabulous in the first place.
So, the story of the Hudson Hornet kind of leaves us with this big, fascinating question. For a brief moment in time, it was arguably the best car in America. But it died because it couldn't win in the showroom. It's a powerful and kind of sad reminder that in the race for success, sometimes even the most brilliant engineering in the world isn't enough.